Hello everyone, welcome back. I just want to put together a small little video and go through some of the basics of building an F1 car, just to help some of the newcomers to the class out there get it right the first time, hopefully. Sometimes it's not very obvious some of the things that you need to do on these chassis, even though they're quite simple. So let's have a look. This particular car is the Team Saxo F1 180 V4. It's a general standard kind of F1 car with a rear pod plate, side dampening tubes, center shock and side links. So an important thing when you're building these cars, these side links need to be able to move freely. Otherwise you'll bind up the pod. Your pod needs to be able to move freely as well. So down inside, they all have different types of pivot balls. When you build it, without having the center shock or the side dampers connected, make sure that the pod is nice and free, but not too loose. And make sure that it can rotate left and right and move forwards and backwards. Something else that's quite important is your diff. So you can see at the moment mine's actually needs a rebuild. Correction, it doesn't. The tire was just stuck on the car stand there. It's nice and smooth. Alright. What I have seen at the track sometimes is people rotate the tire very slowly and the opposite one moves in the opposite direction. But what they don't realize is if you do this very quickly, sometimes if your diff is dirty, it'll actually catch, and you'll see like when it's making that noise there, it's actually turning over the pinion. So I'm being very aggressive on it. But I have seen some cars where you basically just turn it how I'm doing right now, and it turns the left hand wheel in the same direction. You'll need to rebuild your diff if that's happening, because it's actually catching and it's not allowing the wheels to rotate at different speeds when it's going through a corner. So it'll give you very weird handling. There's a number of videos online about building diffs, so I won't go too in depth about that. But one way that you can kind of set it up for this sort of tension that you need, hold the right hand wheel and the spur gear at the same time, and then you want to try and rotate the left wheel. Alright, and then get a feel for how tight it is. And if it feels really hard for you to turn it, it's probably a good indication of how hard it would be for you to get traction on a loose surface. So what you want to do is start off with it, so if you're not quite sure, if the track is slippery, start off with being able to turn the left hand wheel kind of fairly easily. And when you go out for a drive, pay attention to the noise that the diff makes. So when you start to accelerate, you kind of hear this sort of high-pitched noise, and that's the diff slipping. So if it's slipping a lot, come back to the pits, nip it up a little bit, feel the tension again, because you want to get used to what this feels like. So then that's an easy way for you to kind of set your diff up for different traction levels and different tracks. And then once you get used to that, each time when you build your diff, if you stay at one particular track, you'll be able to kind of get it fairly close to what you need for that particular track. And then obviously on the day, depending on temperatures and things and the conditions, just adjust your diff throughout the day, because obviously if you start racing super early in the morning, track won't have much heat in it, so it might not have that much traction. So either adjust your diff or change your tires to a lower temperature tire so you can get more grip. Okay. Something else that's really important with F1 and pan cars is I see a lot of people making the mistake of making their wires very short, and they'll pull them straight across to the motor. And what this does is it limits the pod's ability to function correctly to actually give you traction. So this is called droop, by the way. It's one of the settings that we set up on these cars. So as the motor torques over in the direction of travel and accelerates, obviously you get an opposite reaction going in the opposite direction, and that'll raise the chassis. And you see here how much my pod is moving, and that's the droop. And we run anywhere from about 1 to 2.5, depending on what kind of chassis you have. Some chassis like more, some chassis like less. But that's the kind of movement that you want in order to be able to get traction. And it also gives you a little bit more steering as well, depending on how much droop you have. Adjust your droop to obviously the tires that you have and how much grip the track has. So good place to start, probably about 1.5 millimeters. How we check that is with a special type of drip gauge. This is a pan car drip gauge. It's very different to a touring car drip gauge. That's a touring car drip gauge because touring car droop is measured in a different location compared to a pan car. Pan car, we measure the droop right at the back of the pod underneath the axle. So what you do is you've got to get yourself something similar to this, pan car drip gauge, and some 10 millimeter droop blocks, same kind of droop blocks that we use for touring cars. Pop these underneath the chassis, slide the droop gauge in the back, and then obviously you read off how much droop you have, and you can see this particular gauge goes right down to -2.8. Okay. Now, there's two ways you can set your droop, and you do need to be aware of what happens when you do this. So one particular way is you can wind in more preload or less preload, but be aware that's going to change your ride height at this particular point here where your pod joins up to the chassis, because it'll droop down, or it'll either be level or jackknife. I run my car droop down by about 1 millimeter. So I normally run about 5.6 millimeters ride height at this particular point, and then measure up here, and I'll come down to 4.6, and then I'll normally match that to my front ride height, which would be 4.6 as well. So the whole front section of the car would be 4.6 from that point, and then here it would be 5. And that gives me a nice kind of soft squishy end. It's nice for loose tracks, and obviously you can decrease that and make it a little bit more flat depending on how much traction you have. The best way to adjust droop is with the length of the shock shaft. Alright, so in there, shock shaft. The manual for this particular car recommends to build it at 10 millimeters. I run it at 12, which gives me quite a bit more droop. Haven't checked that in a while, so let's just have a look, show you how this all works, and we'll see how much droop we run in. Let's just get the tires off. So you do need to have your tires off to be able to get your droop done, because the diameter is a lot larger than the 10 millimeters will lift the chassis off the surface. And I do recommend doing this on a nice flat surface, your setup board. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes, so I'm not using a setup board at the moment. Make sure you take your front tires off as well. And we'll talk about front droop in a few minutes as well. Different chassis set that up in different ways. Generally it's done with shims. Basically very similar. You're either giving a lot of preload to the front spring or taking it away. Okay, let's have a look at this droop. Let's see where we're sitting. So I can't even get the gauge under there at the moment. That's 2.6. Let's turn it around, spin it to 8. Oh. Alright, so we're running quite a lot of droop on the car. Looks like probably about 3.5. About 3.5 millimeters on this particular chassis. Again, that may not work for other chassis. You'll just have to find basically your tuning window. This car has a very wide tuning window and responds very well to small inputs. With the front droop, it's done with the shims. Apologies there for the focus. I'm using a GoPro camera. I don't really focus very well. The focal point is a bit further away than what I would like. But as you can see, we've got some shims in the top here. If you add shims, you compress the spring, so you're putting preload on it, you're taking droop away, and if you decrease the shims, you're decreasing the preload, allowing the kingpin to drop down further, and you're giving yourself more droop. And then basically how you see that droop is the gap. So when the car is sitting down, you'll see this gap underneath the steering block, and basically just eyeball it. It's kind of hard to measure in there. And the more droop you have, kind of gives you a little bit more on-power steering, corner exit steering, and just makes the car handle some bumps and things a little bit better as well. Yeah. This particular chassis, for those of you out there that use the Team Saxo chassis, there's a few little tricks and things that you can do with this car. Quick little adjustments, like if you're happy with your tire selection, and you feel like you just want a little bit more traction or a little bit more steering, it's actually some very small little tricks that you can do. You can remove this front screw. Don't take out the post, just remove the screw. That'll give you a little bit more steering. If you want more traction, remove the rear screw only and keep the front one in. And if you want a little bit more traction and steering, you can remove both of them. And what this does is just frees the chassis up a little bit, because you'll see here this is the battery plate, and it's connected in the rear, and it has these two front connections as well, which really stiffens it up. So ultimately what you're doing there is you kind of, as the chassis flexes, you're sort of changing your roll center in the rear, because you're allowing this carbon piece to actually flex when it gets pulled by the rear here. And another way you can do this as well, which can be a little bit more aggressive, is you can change the angle of the links. So you can put a 1mm shim underneath here if you're looking for more steering, and then that'll give you a little bit more steering as well. A little bit more fiddly than doing this method, and kind of gives you steering in different parts of the corner as well. I'd say this gives you more overall steering, and probably, I'd say, corner entry and kind of mid. And this method would kind of make it a lot more twitchy throughout the whole corner, basically, into it, mid, and corner exit. Another quick tip for doing some tuning adjustments and things on this particular chassis when you're at the track. It can be kind of tricky to change your rear springs. So the setup that this car has is it's got these what do you call these screws? Oh, it'll lose me now. Set screw. Right. So it's got some, I think, 10 or 12 millimeter set screws in the back here that are connected to this little black piece that holds the springs, like the spring retainer. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to wind this particular part up and down. That's why it's got these ridges on it, so you can get some grip on it. But I found that to be not very user-friendly, should we say. So what I do if I want to change springs to the track in a nice quick way, pop the side dampers off so that you have access to the set screw underneath. Get yourself a set of long nose pliers so that you can grab this spring retainer. Wind the set screw out and pull the whole unit out with the long nose pliers. Pull the spring off, change it to a new spring, put it back into position, holding it with the long nose pliers again, kind of line the set screw up with the hole, and then undo it basically, so anti-clockwise, and just rotate it all the way back up again. And do the same for the other side. Bring the set screws to a level position. So when you build this whole setup, make sure that the distance that you have, if you're going to use the set screw method to adjust your preload and your tweak for the side springs, make sure that the distance that you have between each one when the set screw is level with the top of the chassis plate is the same distance to the top of the spring retainer. So make sure they're even on both sides, and then that way when you're doing your preload adjustments you can just use a 1.5 millimeter wrench and wind it in and out for doing your preload, which adjusts your tire pressure on the front here to be nice and even. What I do for that is I use touring car tweak wheels. They work nicely on F1 cars as well. I won't do a demonstration of that now, but basically what it is a set of wheels that you made out of carbon or aluminium, and they have a weighted section on the front. Put those on. You have your rear tires on. Car is on a setup board. Make sure everything's flat. You got your battery in. It's at race weight. Push down on the chassis, settle the suspension, and then what you want to do is you want to raise the car at the front from the middle. Raise it nice and slowly. And what happens as you raise it, whichever one of these weights drops first, that's the tire that is lifting first. So it doesn't have the same pressure on it. So basically kind of doing corner balancing here, which is similar to full scale cars. So say for example, if the left front here lifted first, what you want to do is you want to screw down on the opposite corner and put a little bit more preload into this side spring and wind this one out a tiny bit. So however much you put in here, remove whatever you put into the left hand side. Set it again, raise the car, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to get both of these weighted wheels to drop at the same time, which means that both front wheels have even pressure. So as the car is driving, you're going to get the same amount of performance out of the left and the right hand tire. Sometimes when you have a bad crash or you roll a lot or something, you can actually tweak your pod as well. So one way to check that is take all the tires off, put it onto a nice flat surface, and make sure the pod is sitting nice and flat. If it's not and it's bowed, either on this corner or the other corner, what you want to do is back off all the screws that hold the aluminium motor mounts on, and you'll need to back these ones off that hold the wing on as well. So what you're doing is you're just releasing that tension that's happened in the, like sometimes when you roll, because all this stuff is nice and tight and torqued up, what can happen is these pieces can move and it'll put a twist into the carbon, and your car will not drive correctly, having a twist up in the back here. So you want that to sit nice and flat. Loosen off all the screws. Sometimes you don't have to take off the shock mount ones. Sometimes you do. It just depends on how badly it's twisted up. So make sure that's nice and flat as well. Yeah, it's basically about it. Just some simple guidelines there and information for particularly the Team Saxo chassis, just building it. If you guys want to know some more specific information or some setups and things, just flick me a message. More than happy to help out. Alrighty, catch you guys later.